All right. Last talk in this session is by Stephen Worth of WorthWize Consulting and me. I'm going to stand here and answer questions or say smart stuff.
Your partner in crime.
That's right. The title of the talk is Metalnx 2.0, The Future of Metalnx. Take it away.
All right, thanks, Terrell. Yeah, let me start off by first make sure everybody knows my other, if you will, conspirators here. Terrell Russell with the iRODS Consortium, Mike Conway, who's within IEHS, have been part of all this. Many of you who've been here before may know me as someone who worked with Dell EMC. I left the company last year and have been trying to continue working with Metalnx since that time, along with doing many other things. But what I'd like to do this morning, since I know I stand between you and lunch and conversation, is to tell you a story. And the story is going to be a little bit about how Metalnx has got started, how it has evolved, and where we're trying to take it to moving forward. So this all starts out fairly simple. Let me, if I can, take you back to 2014 for a moment. So we're going to go into the Wayback Machine and sit down and think about the things that happened in 2014. I'd kind of forgotten many of these myself, but you know, little things like we first heard the word Ebola and realized that it could become a global epidemic. We started and still continue to look for the poor folks who were part of Malaysia Flight 370 that have been lost for many years now. For those of you who are rock and roll venue, Fleetwood Mac decided to reunite until 2 months ago when they decided to unreunite, but let that go as it is. Brazil hosted the World Cup. We had the Winter Olympics in Russia. We actually landed a robot on an asteroid. I thought that was rather interesting that year. Kind of got missed out on the news, but you know, some of the photographs that came out of the European Space Agency were quite impressive, and you know, a number of things went on. But myself at the time, I was in the storage world, and my life kind of revolved around that. And one of the things that I was acutely aware of in my role at the time was the fact that there were about 4 zettabytes of data existing in the world at the time, because my company paid for these studies and we updated them every year. And you know, we worked hard and convinced everybody that the world was going to be full of big data lakes, and they were all going to look like the picture you see up on the screen. Okay, anybody still believe that? It depends upon your point of view, but as we started working more and more with people, we learned, particularly those involved on a lot of genomics type research, that their data lakes, even if they're curated, and please note these are library books in this picture, never turns up looking like the prior picture. It ends up becoming a mess of information that's hard to manage, hard to deal with. And this is kind of what got us interested in looking at how metadata and data management would evolve. Because we're quite aware, being a company that actually did storage-related work, that you can do, you know, index, ingest, search, all these kind of tools to help manage your information, and it works really, really well with computers. But even to this day, as we have all the tools we have available, we still find that metadata has properties that we don't handle as well as we'd like to. And you know, sorry, Terrell, you can smack me later if you like to about this, but you know, metadata still struggles with time-varying metadata and what I call complex context metadata, essentially metadata that has so much connotation around it that can either be visual or time-based oriented that it's really hard to classify consistently, even in an ontology system like Martin's was just talking about, because of the fact it doesn't stay static. You know, and you might ask yourself, why is all this considered to be a problem by people who are looking way out into the future? Because my background is largely in product innovation and development. And that's because I always have to realize that we build systems really targeted around how to make the machine do what we want, not necessarily designing the machine to do things the way we want to do it ourselves. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if you've done any research at all about how, for example, the human mind works, you well recognize that it's a very sophisticated parallel processor, much more capable of recognizing information in many cases than we can do with the best of breed supercomputers we have today. No offense meant to the folks of Pittsburgh. But I'm not going to get into that, but it's this aspect of the machine, or working around the machine, that actually has led to what got our interest into all this. We started seeing out of people that we were interacting with some very interesting patterns around how they were handling their big data. And I'm going to put up a few pictures that may be a little bit alarming, and I just will tell you that I know that these stories are actually somewhat for real. First of these, I was running across customers of ours and we were preaching, make multiple copies, back it up, so forth and so on. Tell me flat out, no, we're going to eliminate any data we don't need because we can't afford to keep paying for your storage. Well, that's fairly true because data has been growing tremendously. As I was showing in the other slide, we're now looking at roughly right around 24 or so zettabytes of data today, and all projections say 2 years from now will easily be 45 zettabytes or more. So whatever you think of as being data in the world today, it doubles in under 2 years. So we're really hitting exponential categories. The other thing people are doing is that they're dropping down to just keeping one copy, which horrifies me personally on a number of different levels, but it is what it is. And then finally, and I love this idea, is now some organizations are starting to put up what I call toll gates. Oh, we'll keep the data out here, but if you want to access it or use it, we're going to charge you a toll to get to it because we got to pay for our cost of our systems. So, not saying that any of these are good. I'm also not saying any of these are bad, but I'm trying to make the point that metadata is still evolving around us, and this is what caught our attention. My history with this goes all the way back to 2014 when I was asked to start looking at how metadata, particularly user-defined metadata, may evolve and be part of how we will handle big data systems in the future beyond just what we think of today as indexing, searching, machine learning type activities. So I met up with an old colleague of mine who's retired, Sue Smith, along with other fellows that I worked with at the time, Sasha Pagel, Patrick Combs, and pardon me, I'm getting some of this down as a historical reference before it's all kind of forgotten in the global wisdom of the world. But we started going out and interviewing people who were using our products, particularly who were dealing with big data. And we discovered along the way that there were a number of customers that we had at the time that were working with or had been looking at this thing called iRODS. And so we started learning more about iRODS, and over time, we decided to join the consortia, meaning my prior employer decided to join the consortia, and we realized that in order to learn more about this, we needed to do two things. One is that we needed to enable getting more people engaged in working with large-scale metadata management, and the other is we need to find a way to kind of capture indirectly what it is they're trying to do so we understand how this all goes forward. A lot of back and forth, a lot of interviews with a lot of customers, but we decided in the end the thing to do was to help expand the ability of people to leverage iRODS. And we started this little project that eventually became called Metalnx to help essentially build a user interface to make it easier and simpler to work with iRODS. Managed to find some funding, got a small team of developers in Brazil. Some of them I think many of you have met who've been up here in past years to events where we've shown this tool. But to make the story very simple, the goal is to move from having to deal with everything with the command line to try and make it to something that's more graphically oriented, with people understand and use, and also do it in a way so that it could be extensible by the overall user community. So we started our work, which involved many, many months of building wireframes and going around and visiting people to walk them through scenarios and getting their feedback. But finally, in 2015, we got to doing software development work. We got a prototype together that we released as a beta to a few select customers. I brought it to the user group meeting here for iRODS in 2015, the picture Terrell was showing earlier in Chapel Hill. And we also showed it off at BioIT World, got a lot of positive feedback about it. The big things that we found that people liked about what we were doing was, of course, the graphical collection management, automated extraction of metadata, or at least a framework for doing it, metadata templates, and of course metadata searching, the basic things. In fact, I feel very bad following behind you, Martins, because you just you just kind of showed off all the things that we're trying to do here. But we had a big debate inside of my old prior company about what to do with this. Sell it commercially, make it a service, what for. And finally we decided that the right strategy here was to make it publicly available as best we could, because our goal was to help more people leverage these kind of tools, which we thought in turn would help expand the use of metadata in storage management. So we started pursuing getting an open source approval inside of the company to bring this product to outside. And we started getting some real success. Metalnx started winning awards both internally and externally. We did a couple more betas, but then we ran into a snag. And the snag was that Dell acquired EMC. No complaint against Dell, but as part of any corporate restructuring, everything got reevaluated. And during the time that evaluation was going on, our attempt to get the open source approvals also got put on hold. And so during that time, we spent a latter part of 2016 working into a number of different areas that kind of lie into some of the metadata template activities you're hearing about this week. In particular, we started looking at how to do on-the-fly metadata data typing. We looked at building metadata dictionaries, doing point-to-point transfers outside of the iRODS environment. I got tickled, Terrell, with your talk yesterday because it's exactly what we were working on our own. And doing ontology validation, which Martin's just talked about, along with template chaining and so forth. And we got many of these things prototyped, and we actually showed them off at some of the meetings and to the metadata working group. But essentially put, we were on hold for the latter part of 2016. In 2017, we finally got our approval to bring the software out, to put the software in open source. We did, and a number of releases came out. And then unfortunately, when all the reorganization work got done, the decision was made that this particular development program was going to end at Dell EMC, and so it was shut down. But before it was shut down, we did manage to get revision 1.4 to the door, which I was so thrilled being here this week to find some of you are using that I never knew about. One of the problems with putting things in open source, it's not always clear who's downloading what and making use of it. But you know, we ended up in it with a nice little set of features. Some things that I'm particularly proud that we got into it was the ability to have, for a RODS admin, the dashboard page that allows you to kind of see what the context of the environment is and to drill down and get information. I'm always still pleased that we were able to get the ability to manage permissions and handling groups related to permissions built into the tool properly. That can be a little bit confusing. And also like the fact that we were able to actually get support for iROD tickets done along with some rule deployment right before the end. So that's what was out there. We were able, through continued conversations, to convince Dell EMC to actually contribute Metalnx to the consortia back earlier this spring, just a couple, I guess it's been about 3 months now. They also granted approval for us to move the license from the, if you will, the GPL version 2 license, which is roughly what EMC was using, to a BSD3 license, so it matched up with what's available in the consortia. That's their standard. We've moved all the repositories, all the domain names and so forth, started putting the product back into the CI integration. And also earlier this year, the folks at NIEHS decided to adopt Metalnx as part of their effort for building their data commons you heard Mike speaking about yesterday. And in the process of tailoring this to do their work, they've torn, I hate to use the word torn because it's not bad, but they had to pull it apart to fix some things and change some things to make it compatible with their environment, and started putting it back together, and they have the version that they're using, which they recently just also contributed back into the consortia. So there's been a working group around Metalnx that's been operating now, I guess, what, 4 months or so? And we've taken a look at the work done between the two and kind of reached the conclusion that going forward, the foundation for Metalnx should be based on what the folks at NIEHS just finished modifying, and that's what we're trying to do going forward. By the way, you might be noticing these cute little logos on the side. These are some of the logos for Metalnx that we developed over time, which never saw the light of day until today. Trying to figure out how to brand something internally to make it look like a product when it's not really a product is one of the harder things you can ever do in your life. So where's Metalnx today? Well, the archives that you may have noticed in GitHub in the past are now all inside of iRODS Contrib. That's where they're going to live going forward. It's still the same 4 pieces. There is the web application Metalnx-web. There is the remote monitoring daemon, which is used to collect the information at the iRODS service nodes that come back to the dashboard page. There is an MSI package of microservices which we put together to help do a collection of what rules are actually installed on your machines, along with doing automated metadata extraction. And there's finally one that we use as a test connection library for an installation script, which, as I'll explain in a moment, probably will be going away. The structural model of Metalnx has not changed. It was originally designed to either ride alongside of iRODS or with iRODS, but it's always was kind of organized as a entity that could be packaged and expanded and multiple instances created as needed to help deal with scale-out type activity. Right now, the Rev 2.0 branch is the master branch that you'll find in the GitHub repository. And some of the changes that have been made to kind of get better prepared for the future have been around looking to turn this into a containerized kind of deployment. Some of the things that have been done is taking all the different property files that were scattered around the Tomcat framework, pulling them out, and moving them back into a single properties file that will probably live wherever you want it, but right now it's living in Etsy iRODS. And then we're trying to get the framework together so that going forward we can either deliver the thing as a jar file which you can deploy yourself, or preferably into a self-contained Docker image that you can then just deploy. You adjust the properties in the property file for your environment, you deploy, it runs. That's where we're trying to get to. And we're also trying to change some of the way the properties work so that you can turn on and turn off things that folks won't. For example, many people do not use iRODS tickets. Why have it turned on if you're not going to be using it, for example? So the software is out there, it builds, it runs. It's what I would still call a beta. There are a few things that we still need to fix before we'll call it, quote, a formal release. We were hoping to have it ready for today, but we're still not quite there. We have to update our documents. We have not tested tickets. We're not sure if rules deployment still works correctly because it's not been tested or not. And if you look on the archive, as with all things related to open source software, you'll see there's still a few bugs we've got to plow through, but we're getting there. So where are we at? Well, we're in the consortium adoption process right now, which means that first and foremost, I need to get some things done. And those things are, first is trying to get more information about who is using Metalnx, what they need it to do. I've got a little bit from those of you who are admitted that you're using it today, but if there are others who are and have not said anything, please let us know because we want to find out what the user base really looks like. We need to get more involvement, both in terms of gaining more users and gaining more participants and helping to move this forward, because with it now being in the consortia, we need to build a community development model around this, which means essentially trying to do all the work in iRODS Contrib, getting folks to participate to help who may want to do things or build their own tools and bring them back in and donate them or help fix bugs. And we need to kind of put a structure around this. So, we're trying to put the roles together, but we're going to end up needing an organizer, members in the working group. There already is one, but it needs to expand. We need volunteers to help do coding, bug reviews, or code reviews, if you will, and someone to kind of help do release coordinating. So the end result is, what I'm here is a request to ask those of you who would like to see this go forward, come participate. It can't just be 2 or 3 people. What we really need is more input coming into this to adjust. I mean, Martins, if you pardon me for picking on you, I'd just love to integrate what you just did around the front of this more than you can imagine. But these are the kinds of improvements we'd like to make so that this becomes a nice tool going forward. And you might ask, why are we bothering to do all this? And the answer is actually straightforward. There's long been a need amongst the iRODS community, because if you know the history, you know that there are several different UIs that have been built over time. But where this is kind of heading towards is that in order to do more around metadata template, metadata dictionaries, and ontology integration, you have to start bringing in other tools. You've seen it from Martins, you've heard about some of the work others are doing with indexing and searching. And it would be nice to have something that exists as a framework that can provide a simplified front end for people to use, both administrators and users, and yet allow us to tie other things into it. This is roughly the work that the NIEHS crew has been trying to do earlier this year. And there is a roadmap of places we'd like to see this go, and of course, based upon the participants in the working group, that can be adjusted depending upon what the membership of the consortia wants. In particular, one of the things that we're doing is we're recommending back to Terrell and the consortia that the Metalnx working group needs to be combined with the metadata working group and basically turn it into one team, because this is going to have a lot of overlap going forward in the future. We'd like to bring the newer consortium model from metadata templating directly into Metalnx rather than the version that we created when I was at Dell EMC, so it'll be a little bit more extensible. Folks have been asking for a number of things through time we've not had a chance to do. iScan and IFSeek support, the ability to create accounts at the Metalnx login screen, the ability to skin it so it looks more like what they want it to do for their own organization, and likewise bringing some of the principles about trying to map into how fair data should be applied so that you can set your own rules and policies through iRODS rules around that and yet have those reflected appropriately inside of the Metalnx application. So, and you know, there are people working on this. I kind of put this one slide up only to show you that the bottom left corner is an idea that we had about how metadata data definitions might work going back to 2014. And the upper one, I know it doesn't show all that well, is actually a mock-up that one of the folks at NIEHS allowed me to pick up to show you that they're actually already working on some of this themselves. So we're getting there. And let's see, well, Terrell, let me ask if I got...
Yeah, you got 3.5 minutes.
Well, I was actually going to try and do just a very short demo to let folks see how
That's
this is
good.
changed around a little bit. Let me bring the dashboard back up here. Oh, sorry, go the other way a little bit. But what we've tried to do is to remove a lot of the skinning and other things off the head that's kind of tied to the environment that it was in earlier. But you can see it still brings up the dashboard. It allows you to drill down.
This is the master branch?
This is right off the master branch, built in this room yesterday afternoon at 2 o'clock. So if you have any doubt it can be done, this is the proof. But you know, it gives you, for example, shows you what's going on with the machines. You can actually, it pulls out and shows you the last 25 logs out of the iRODS server log at the bottom if you're trying to chase down information. Now, it doesn't report microservices. This is one of the areas that I know is not working correctly. The CMake environment changed a lot since we last worked on it before.
All of it. We changed all of it.
And I have something to keep me busy this weekend. But most of the features that were there earlier, the ability to pull into collections, to drill down and look into metadata, has changed a little bit. For example, one of the modifications that were made was actually pulling the View Info button over here to the right-hand side so you can more quickly get to the file information, the metadata information. They even added a ability for certain file types to see a preview right in here rather than having to go and open the file by pulling it out of the catalog and bringing it up. And one of the other things I thought was really a nice addition personally is this idea to get a quick thumbnail of what the file or the object has inside of it right here on the side. So
the preview
you know, these
is
are some of
actually
the
downloading the whole. The preview is downloading the whole object, the whole file, and showing
When
it.
we were doing it, yeah, because we were keeping it generic. If you clicked on a file to look into it, you were literally bringing it down to take a look at it.
In the
because
browser. Okay.
Our intent had been to, and how should I phrase it, didn't quite get there before we ran out of runway, but we were actually going to basically add a MIME type wrapper around it, so we would have brought up the tool of choice to do that with, and that can still be done in this environment.
Some of that is already built in, the MIME type
Yeah.
sensitivity built in.
Right, but if you've got a 50 megabyte JPEG, you don't want to just preview that, right?
It can get bad quick, and one of the things I
Yeah.
do want to give the folks at NIEHS credit for was that they really improved some of the download capability, and I'll demonstrate quickly that it still works nicely. By the way, for anybody who's curious, what you just saw is actually done with 3 virtual machines running on a HP laptop that is now 8 years old. That's pretty darn nice. You know, it used to be when it was doing this and also calculating the checksums in this kind of environment, which I used to carry around for demo purposes, that little file extraction, I would have talked to you for about 10 seconds to hide the fact it was going slower. So, you know, they've done a number of nice things trying to help make sure that it works well in a larger scale-out environment. This is one of the reasons we decided to shift to their improvements rather than trying to keep forward with some of the things that have been done in the past. And in the interest of lunch, I'll stop, take questions at this point. If anybody would like to see more, you know, grab me at the end of lunch. I'll be glad to walk you through and show you what it does or doesn't do. So,
Excellent.
thank you.
Yes. Does anyone have any questions about that that are worthy of being in front of everyone? We have one from the person you wanted to talk to. Look at that.
He's going to ask me the hard question I can't answer.
No, it's a very easy question. How about recursive downloading of folders? Is it still zipped or tarred, or is it not supported?
Actually, right now, what the framework does, because again, it was generic, it will bundle them up into a zip file and dump the zip file into the local directory.
Yeah, and that zip file is then created on a temp resource directory or in iRODS or?
No, it doesn't.
Metalnx
What this
system?
interface does, it brings it onto your local machine,
Oh.
because when we think of download, we're thinking about it in the classic I put, I get
Okay.
model.
Yeah.
There's no reason in the world why that could not be added into it, though. There's a nice service layer inside of the Metalnx web under the services area. You just have to write a different service and put a binder for a different, when you put an action, just put a different action in,
Yeah.
and it would do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I know where you're going with that.
Yeah,
Yes, you can
that,
do it.
That could be really bad really quick also, right? Download everything.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, excellent. Thank you again.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.